Welcome to the Angel Wing LLC. This is Sachin Karnik. Today I'm starting a complimentary series of talks and recordings that connect with our religious studies presentations on Thursday evenings. So I'm starting here today, which is the 8th of May 2025, on a very common question regarding the problem of evil, pain, and suffering. Why does it exist if God exists? This is the basic question. So this is my first in-depth recording on this, and continue on this in a systematic series. So first of all, the problem of evil, pain, and suffering lies at the intersection of theology, metaphysics, ethics, and existential inquiry. So let's understand that point first. This problem is very simple to understand. It's common in our minds. If there is an omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent God, monotheistic God, then why is there evil, pain, and suffering? That's the basic question. Right, so within the monotheistic traditions, the great monotheistic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the conceptualization of God as omnipotent, meaning all-powerful, omniscient, meaning all-knowing, and omnibenevolent, meaning all-good, establishes a rigorous doctrinal framework. That refers to the fact that there is the doctrine that God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent. This is how God is conceptualized, or we could say God has revealed himself that way through the scripture, through the sages, through the prophets, etc. All right, so that's kind of the doctrinal framework. Now, the problem of evil can be conceptualized as follows. A central philosophical and theological issue, which is the problem of evil, that questions how an all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good God can allow for the existence of evil, pain, and suffering. It challenges the coherence of classical theism by juxtaposing divine attributes with observable, moral, and natural evil, right? So that basically means that there's a question that comes about in the human mind. Then that question turns into a serious problem for theology, which is the problem of evil. And the problem of evil is a central philosophical and theological issue. What does that mean? Well, philosophical issue is kind of looks at conceptually, if God exists, then how can evil exist? What is the philosophy behind that? What is the understanding behind that? That's more in terms of the analysis that can be done through philosophical musing or philosophical inquiry. And then theological, the reason that that's theological is because in the tradition of all of these three great religions, as well as other theistic traditions, like in India, this same question comes about. And so it's a theological question in terms of the development of theology itself, right? So theology is the disciplined and systematic study of God, God's divine attributes, and religious truths. So in this context, theology examines how God's nature and will, meaning God's will, are understood in relation to human suffering and the presence of evil. And what does evil even mean? That's another question. Right, so we're going to really try to break this down carefully. So theology, one of the definitions of theology, is that it's a disciplined and systematic study of God, of God's divine attributes, and the religious truths that are revealed in many, many scriptures of the world. So in this context, theology examines how God's nature and will, because God has divine attributes, God's will prevails, things like that. How can that be understood in relation to human suffering, and evil. Right? So this is a systematic study. Theology is a systematic study. So hence the problem of evil, the problem of pain, the problem of suffering, which kind of are all together, it exists, or this is posed at the intersection of theology, of metaphysics, and that's the philosophical aspect, of ethics, the ethical actions human beings perform, as well as perhaps what might be called divine ethics, divine justice, and existential inquiry. That means the inquiry into our own existence. So existential inquiry is a mode of philosophical reflection using our intellect that explores human existence. It explores human freedom, anxiety, death, and meaning. This is called existential inquiry. And so let's not, please, my humble request is not to get overwhelmed by the technical language. I'll break it down for you as much as I can. This existential inquiry, almost every human being does at some point or another. You don't have to have a degree in philosophy for that. But it's a way of reflecting, and there's a formal process that philosophers certainly go through. So a mode of philosophical reflection that explores human existence. So it's an internal philosophical reflection about human existence. Why are we here? Where did we come from? Who created us? About human freedom. What kind of freedom do we have? What is even human freedom? About the anxiety that we feel, about so many things, the fears that we have. Then death. Death is going to happen. What do we do about it? How do we think about it? How do we deal with that? And then is there meaning in life? So these are all parts of an existential inquiry. So just to be clear, philosophical reflection refers to the disciplined process of critical, rational inquiry into fundamental questions about reality, knowledge, meaning, morality, existence, and consciousness. I'm going to go through that again. So when we are talking about philosophical reflection about the problem of evil, about anything really, it is a disciplined process of critical inquiry. It is a disciplined process, meaning there's a logic behind it. There is a way to go about it, right? So that's what's meant by a critical and rational way of inquiring into the questions themselves. It's very beautiful, and it's a way of really gaining a lot of solid foundation psychologically, right? So this is the general concept of philosophical reflection, and it is inquiry, it is rational and critical inquiry into basic questions, fundamental questions about reality, about knowledge, meaning and morality, and existence and consciousness, about reality. What is real, what is not real, what makes something real, how real is a dream, for example. That's a question, right? It's a basic question. Questions about knowledge. What's even meant by knowledge? What's meant by information versus knowledge? What is meant by wisdom compared to knowledge? Those kinds of interesting points. What is meaning? When we say something has meaning to me, it has some inherent meaning or innate meaning. What does that refer to? So this is a process of inquiry into these questions. There's also morality. The question of what is meant by morality. Who decides what is morality? Is morality absolute? Is it given by God? Is it commanded by God? How does that happen? Or is it something that's relative completely? Is it based on just genetics and evolution? What is it based on? Where does it come from? What is the source of morality? Right? So again, this is a critical process, meaning philosophical reflection is a disciplined process of critical and rational inquiry. Now, inquiry into existence itself. That this world exists, we go through waking state, dream state, deep sleep state. We have a body, we have demands of the body, things like that. So this is all part of questioning and inquiring into the nature of our own existence. And then, of course, the massive question of consciousness. What is consciousness? Why are we conscious? Is God giving us that consciousness? So these are all philosophical and religious questions alike. So philosophical reflection involves examining assumptions, analyzing concepts, clarifying values, and seeking coherence in our worldview through sustained thought and dialogue. Let's see if we can try to break that down a little bit further. So philosophical reflection, and this is some of the background actually before we even get further into the question about evil and suffering and all those things. We need to understand this very carefully. Philosophical reflection involves examining assumptions. That's the first thing. What are our assumptions? What are we conditioned with? What are we assuming to be true? Are we even questioning that? Are we examining that? And that's not easy to do, but that's what reflection is all about, and we need help doing that. So that's why we read the works of great philosophers and thinkers, past, who have existed in the past, like Greek antiquity, all the way to present moment, and Eastern traditions also, right? So what assumptions do we have regarding all of these points about reality, knowledge, meaning, morality, existence, and consciousness? If we really try to understand even what our assumptions are, that takes time to even be aware of what they are, right? So that's one thing. So philosophical reflection means to examine assumptions. That's the first point. Second point is philosophical reflection means to analyze concepts, certain concepts like theology, like what the concept of evil or versus good. These are all concepts. They are concepts that are referring to some state of being or state of reality, right? So even what's a concept? That you can just keep breaking this down further, but we'll try to keep it relatively straightforward. So to be a philosopher, to reflect philosophically means to analyze concepts. First, we have to understand the concept. What is the concept? Then it has to be analyzed objectively, and then from there, the inquiry process begins, and then eventually a conclusion or a series of conclusions can come about. All right, so that's the second part. Philosophical reflection involves analysis of concepts. The next aspect of philosophical reflection is clarifying values. We all have values and morals and whatnot, but what is exactly meant even by values? You see, so we kind of have a sense of what that is. We have our own values. We feel that to harm another person is immoral or wrong. To steal is wrong. Like the 10 Commandments and things like that. These are all moral statements or ethical statements. Where do they come from? Who decides what they are? See, so philosophical inquiry is necessary to unravel the origin of values, the existence of values, and eventually the clarification of one's own values. And then from there, hopefully, there would be much more lucidity and clarity in the mind about one's own values by going through a whole process of clarifying what those values are. And in doing all of this, we are then seeking, meaning philosophical inquiry aims to seek coherence in our worldview. The world, because we have to have a worldview. We cannot live in this world without a worldview. So again, that's another thing that we can get into. What is meant by a worldview? We'll get to that. But the goal here in philosophical reflection is to seek coherence in our worldview. Is our worldview even coherent right now? Well, it could be if our assumptions and concepts and values and our understanding of morality and consciousness and God and all of those, whatever it might be, it all fits together in a coherent whole. Well, if that's the case, then our worldview is going to be coherent. And I hope that makes sense, right? So philosophical reflection seeks coherence in our worldview through, now how does it do that? Through sustained thought and dialogue. Sustained thought meaning it's a series of thoughts and a series of ideas that are linked together, that come together. That's what sustained thought would mean. I would interpret it that way. And of course, dialogue, because we have to have dialogue. We have to communicate with each other about these things. If we do not communicate with each other and stay in our own head, we will not be able to progress very well. That's why in Angel Wing we have dialogues all the time. We have retreats, monthly retreats and annual retreats, and we have so many programs where dialogue is encouraged. So for example, there's something called theodicy, Theodicy. Well, what is that? So for your information, if you don't know about this, theodicy is a branch of philosophical and theological inquiry concerned with defending the goodness, justice, and omnipotence of God in the face of the existence of injustice, suffering, evil that exists in the world. It seeks to answer the question, if God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, why does evil exist? This is the central question of theodicy. Theodicy. If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, why does evil exist? Right? So now there's some historical context here with regards to this. So the term was popularized by Leibniz, 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 Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, in his 1710 work, Essays on Theodicy, on the goodness of God, the freedom of man, and the origin of evil. So he talked about this. He was the first person to actually use this expression, theodicy. Or maybe he wasn't the first person, but he popularized this word. So the underlying problem is an ancient problem. All right, so it is found in several places. The problem of evil is found in the book of Job in the Hebrew Bible. It is found in Platonic and Stoic philosophy. It is found in the writings of Augustine of Hippo, and also in the Confessions. And like for example, the Confessions, City of God, these are works of Augustine of Hippo. It's also found in Islamic theology, discussions on divine predestination. And the word is spelled Qadar, Qadar, maybe that's how it's pronounced. That is an Islamic theology about divine predestination. Fascinating. And in Christian soteriology and eschatology, Soteriology, and eschatology, Eschatology. So we'll get into these words as we move ahead. So again, to further understand just clearly what is theodicy, because we need to understand all the terminology very, very carefully. And the Thursday evening presentations are good, but there's just not enough time to get into the depth that I would like to get into. That's why I'm creating these supplementary recordings. Anyway, here's some core components of when we try to understand theodicy. So God's attributes, some of them would be what? Omnipotence. Right? So omnipotence is God is all-powerful. In the Sanskrit language, that would be called Sarva Shaktiman. You see, so that is a Sanskrit word for meaning exactly the same thing. Omniscience, God is all-knowing. In Sanskrit, that would be called Sarvagna. That would be called Sarvagna. God is omnibenevolent, perfectly good. God wills only good. So in Sanskrit, again, that would be called Sarvottama Sadguna. Right? So now, these are some basic ideas here. Does evil exist? Yes. Well, what kind of evil is there? Well, there's moral evil caused by human actions. Murder, injustice, things, that injustice, human-generated injustice or harm, that would be called moral evil, because there's a problem in morality. And there's natural evil, which is suffering not caused by humans, earthquakes, diseases, etc. So there's two basic types of suffering. One is caused by human beings, the moral evil aspect, and the natural evil aspect. The logical problem of evil. This is formulated by Epicurus and the late J.L. Mackie. So if God is willing but not able, then God is not omnipotent. This is some of the logic. If God is able but not willing, God is not good. If God is both willing and able, why is there evil? You see these three questions here? The logical formulation of the problem of evil. The problem of evil is formulated in three ways. Right? And this is by Epicurus and by J.L. Mackie. That if God is willing but not able, right? That God wants to change things in the world but cannot do it, then God can't be omnipotent. If God is able to make the changes that are needed in the world because of all the suffering and everything else that goes along with it, but is not willing to do so, then the goodness is an issue. God is not good then. If there's a good God, he would definitely make changes. Now, if God is both willing to make the changes and is able to make the changes, now the real question comes about, why is there evil? You see? So this is a problem here. So the evidential problem of evil, meaning what, focuses not on logical contradiction, but on the improbability of a good God allowing the extent and severity of observed evil. This is the argument for people who make this argument about atheism or agnosticism even. That they say that, there may be some logical contradiction, but the focus is not so much on that. The focus is on the improbability of a good God allowing the extent and severity of observed evil. Right? So this is how the problem of evil is fashioned. Now, major types of theodicies. There's the free will theodicy. There is the soul-making theodicy. There is the greater good theodicy, punishment theodicy, contrast theodicy, process theodicy, and the karmic theodicy in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. Right, so let's go through each of these. The free will theodicy, propagated by Augustine and Alvin Plantinga, Plantinga. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name exactly. Plantinga, maybe Plantinga, something like that. Alvin, Plantinga. The free will theodicy. 2 points. Evil results from human misuse of free will. That we have free will, but we've misused it because of our ego, because of whatever the reasons are, the fall, or all those reasons, or ignorance. It could be a reason. And the free will theodicy also states that God allows freedom to persevere. I'm not saying that right. God allows freedom to preserve moral responsibility. If we didn't have any freedom, how could we develop our morality? We would just be like robots, right? So God allows freedom to preserve moral responsibility. This is called the free will theodicy. Okay, so now with that, I'm going to take a break here with regards to our recording, and we'll pick it up just at this point in the next recording. Thank you so much. This is Sachin Karnik. If you want to get in touch with me with any comments or questions, simply send me a text message, 302-268-4480. I'll be happy to respond to you, and we can touch base that way. Please do make an effort to attend some of our Angel Wing programs if you haven't been doing so. And for those people who have been doing so, my many respects to all of you. We'll continue all of this analysis. There's a lot of stuff to go through, one step at a time. Thank you so much.